Welcome to One Moment Wiser. This is Christy Bridges, and I have a special guest for us today. Now, before we get started, I want to mention that if you haven't gotten your own copy of the 3 a.m. book, When Divorce Keeps You Up All Night, or if you've gotten your copy and wish that you could help other people who are currently broken from divorce recover and build good lives, then there's a group study that has video interviews similar to this one, except shorter, with professionals of every type, like counselors, an attorney, pastors, different people to help your friends and your community recover from one of the hardest things in life. Just go to onemomentwiser.com, the number one, momentwiser.com, to get your group study or to order your book. It's fabulous. Today, we have another author, Janet Weiner. Now, Janet Weiner didn't start out as an author. She's actually also a missionary. She had books on her heart for years. And like many of us who have dreams that are deferred too long, she started to feel the weight of those. Proverbs talks about hope deferred, making the heart sick. And we have to be aware of that. God loves working with us, and He has more inspiration for us than we can get done in this life because we're eternal. And so we have to pay attention and let ourselves flow in healthy ways. So Janet's going to talk to us about that today. Janet, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Mm-hmm. Now, my friend Sarah Soon did a Christmas anthology with
Yes.
you of fiction stories that were just terrific.
Mm.
And that's how I found out about you. Sarah was like, boy, Christy, you need to interview Janet because she's really cool. So tell me a little bit about, let's see, don't want to get too far too fast, right? So tell me a little bit about before you started blossoming as a writer. You were a missionary, and how, what was that like?
Well, I technically still am a missionary, so it was more of a readjusting and a ordering, reprioritizing my time and my focus within being. I still live in France, and we still run a mission center. So, what it was like before was I was very involved full time with running our training schools or overseeing the people that ran them and just running the different managing different aspects of the community life here. And with my husband, who also did a lot, we did. And so we did that for many, many years.
Now, you and your husband moved over to France with the idea that God had called you to minister in a place that most people think, French has been known as a Catholic country for centuries. And so most people think that, if you live in France, you know about the baby Jesus and Mary and Joseph. But God had already been preparing you. You just didn't realize it. What made you think people in France really, they need someone to come over and help them discover Jesus? What brought you to that point?
Well, I can honestly say it wasn't our idea. My husband was many years ago now, finishing up his theological studies, and he was aiming to be a pastor. And we lived in California, and he was nearing the end of that season, and we were both praying about where he would get hired, and we hoped it would be in California, but at the most it would be another state like Arizona. That was how far we were thinking. And missions wasn't on our radar. We just thought we were called to be in the local church, and because it's really all we knew. And one day my husband was on a run during that time, and he was praying about it, and the Lord really gave him a vision, an actual vision. And our church didn't do visions; it was not something that had happened to him before. And in the vision, the Lord told him to go to France and to pray, and that there would be revival. And there's more details, but and he was like, "Is that really you, God?" And so then he sat down on a bench, and the Lord basically replayed it. So it was a very startling answer to prayer, not one we expected, not in the way that we expected. And we took it to we were in a big church. We took it to 3 pastors in a church that didn't do visions or things like that. So, and they all 3 thought it was from God, which was very surprising as well. And right away when Dudley told me, I knew it was from the Lord, and it was so, that was a confirmation too, because it was a complete surprise. But as you alluded to earlier, I had studied French since middle school and through most of high school and through a couple of years in university, just because I liked it. I ended up I was a history major in university, but in the end, when I graduated, I got this French certificate because I took so many French classes because I just liked it. And I, liked it. I know now God was preparing me all that time. So when I arrived in France, I at least had a basic knowledge of French. I still had a long way to go to become comfortable, but that was helpful. So yeah.
I love that. So there's a few points you just mentioned. I do firmly believe Psalm 30. All of a sudden, I've gotten it lost. I think it was 37:4, 34:7. Anyway, the Psalm that says God gives us the desires of our heart, and to me, that's always meant He plants in us the desires. It also says later, it's He that gives us the will and the desire to do His good works that He's planned for us. And so you had a desire to study French because it was fun, it was enjoyable, it was exotic, and you did it enough that you realized later God had been equipping you all along.
Yeah.
I also recognize that He paused and He went in a very wise way, I think. He took it to you, his wife, right? And you said, absolutely, this is God. And so there's a power in 2. Ecclesiastes tells us that 2 are stronger than 1. So if we're aligned, and now sometimes our partners, need to listen to God better. Other times our partners are listening to God, and we need to listen to our partners better. In either case, there's power when 2 are aligned. And then you went to leaders in your church. Again, leaders in churches are just people, right? Sometimes they get it wrong, but it's very healthy. It's very encouraging when they seek God with us and go, yeah, I think God's telling you what to do here. And sometimes they can give us additional guidance too, or additional support. We tend to, in the American spirit, we're like so independent. We're all pioneers. And we forget that the pioneers went with groups of people, right? The pioneers did not just go out into the woods alone. Those were dead people. Pioneers are the ones that people with them. So, we do actually, God gives us a body for a reason. And so that's really neat that you said that. Now, when you went over, it kind of, did it feel a little bit like California? I mean, you're kind of in a place that culturally, the people are, we watch some of the same shows, right? We have some of the same manners of living. And yet you got into a space that you said you were in, like, administrating a school or a center.
That's what we've been doing the last 12 years. When we first came to France in the late 80s, we were in Paris, and we were working with our same mission, Youth with a Mission. And we did a whole variety of things, evangelism, and a whole variety of things. And I had
drama.
What?
Did you do street drama?
We did. We did.
Oh, how fun! I did too. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, and yeah, all kinds of things, and yeah, it was an exciting time. I arrived with 3 children and I had my 4th there. So I was also at home a lot during those years, but I participated as I could. So, and then we had a church in our home. We've just done a variety of things. My husband's really, his gift is to start things and have new vision, new ideas and get things, and he can get things going. So, so that's what we did in those years. And then, I'll leave out a whole, like we were back in California for a while, then we were in Hawaii with our mission, and then and where we, yeah, I know with the Lord keeps giving us these crazy assignments, but to answer your, now we're back in the south of France. It is very different here. You're right. People might watch the same shows, and this time around, being in these last, we've been here since 2009, so I guess it's 15 years this time in the south of France. We it's still very, very different culturally, even though it's more compared to when we lived in Paris in the late 80s, early 90s. Email wasn't even invented. So it was like, I remember we got a fax machine and it was like, we can send things and people get them right, you know. So that's like the technological, like we were in a whole different world. Like I wrote my friends letters in those days. And anyway, so France was more French. Now everything's a little more homogenized because of globalism, but still in the deepest, they are still French, and there's still parts they don't understand about us and we don't understand about them. And their language is very important to them, and their culture and their practices. So yes, it's a Western culture, but they mostly watch French TV shows, and they, you know, but music crosses over, and some of the really big TV shows cross over in movies and things, but it's still very French. So that a day does, I feel very comfortable here, but I'm very aware that I'm a foreigner, and I've lived in France collectively over 20 years. So,
Wow.
and they wouldn't let me forget it either. Not in an unkind way. They're just like, oh, you have a little accent, and oh, it's charming. And I'm like, oh, I wish I didn't have an accent at all. But you know, I wish you didn't notice that. But they mean it in a very kind way. And yeah, so
You know, that's cute though, because every time I hear a Haitian accent, I'm like, I just love, or South African. Oh
yeah,
man, but any kind of African accent.
true.
I'm just like, oh, I just love your accent.
I
And
know,
you know, I think about it when
exactly.
you say that, I think, oh, I'm probably insulting people, but I really do love
No,
it.
it's not. It's only for me who, well, maybe I don't know how other people feel, but it's almost just a little like, oh, busted again. Like, you know,
Oh
sometimes they
yeah.
say, are you Swiss or are you, at least when they start with a European country, I'm like, okay, I don't just stand out as just this American. But I'm
I
not
don't just
ashamed to
wear an
be.
American flag on my chest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not ashamed to be American. I'm very proud,
Right.
but I don't want to walk around here going, I'm American, you know, like I'm trying to
Yeah.
be culturally appropriate, you know, and yet retain my identity. The first time we lived here in Paris, I was trying so hard to be French. I lost a part of me. That was not good. And the Lord helped me see, after a lot of pain and difficulty, that I really needed to be who I was. God made me an American. He made me a woman. He made me born at a certain time in a certain place. That's what I bring to the world. So I need to just be that while being culturally sensitive and learning how to function in the culture in a way that isn't stepping on people's toes. And you know, what are the polite ways to address people, or when you have people for dinner, the polite. I still serve drinks right away. You know, what would you like to drink? And they're always like, no, not yet, because at a French home, you're there about 45 minutes for everything's just way slowed down. So I still kind of my Americanness still comes out, but I also, they give me grace because I am American, so I get that too, you know. So
Well, and you
yeah,
bring a little flavor to the salad,
yeah.
right?
Most
You
people,
know, we each bring our own flavor to the
yeah,
salad. So
that's
you
right.
mentioned when you first got over there, you did a lot of the things in ministry that we
Mhm,
can do in our own places, wherever we are.
mhm, mhm,
Um, the street drama, I always had fun with that. I love street musicians. I love street entertainers. And so doing street drama in a ministry fashion was, to me, just as much fun, if not, well, actually more fun because it actually had a purpose behind
mhm,
it.
mhm,
And so, I mean, that's something you can do anywhere. And
mhm.
then the small groups in your home,
Yeah.
That has
Yeah.
always, I grew up in a church that had small
Mm,
groups. Back
mm,
in the 70s,
mhm,
charismatic movement, we had this huge church. We danced on Sundays, and on Wednesday nights, we met in each other's homes. And
mhm,
that has always been so special
mm,
to me
mm.
to
Yeah.
have, because you don't just see the backs of people's heads, you get into
Yeah.
people's lives and their hearts.
Yeah.
And you have to
So good.
open up and be vulnerable. And sometimes people rub you the wrong way. And guess
Mhm,
what? God uses that to show
mhm,
you how other people are different than you,
mhm,
and how much He loves them, and to teach you how to forgive and how to be more
mhm.
patient and compassionate.
Yeah, that's right.
And that's where what Jesus showed us about God
Mm,
really gets into us, under our skin, and becomes part of us.
mm, mhm,
It's not necessarily in the big things and the big lessons, although there are some important ones. It's in the learning to live in step with Him,
mhm, mhm,
learning to live with His values
mhm,
and love in His way.
mhm.
So that's so neat that when we think about what is it like to be a missionary, we don't always recognize that it's like exactly like it could be right now,
It's
wherever we are.
so true. It's so true. It's
It's
like,
beautiful.
yes.
If you were raising these kids and you were helping in, all these ways, that's a lot. I don't
Mhm.
know how. I mean, I had 3 teenagers move in a couple of years ago, and for the first year, I couldn't string 2 sentences together. I was just glazed
Yeah,
over,
yeah.
and they're good, and they kind of kept to themselves a
Yeah,
lot of times. It
yeah,
was
yeah.
just knowing all that responsibility,
Yeah.
I can't imagine doing it with 3 little ones.
Mhm.
Um, and you did it, and then you had another one.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and at what point did you start to recognize that you needed to make a shift?
Well, it was much later. It was many years later, and it was my kids were grown and gone by the time that I made a shift.
Yeah.
It's just been 7 years now. And my kids are ages 30 to 40. So, my kids have been out of the house for a while. But I, well, it was the year I turned 60. And it just that
Whoa,
was,
wait a minute. What?
yeah.
Oh, French life is good for you.
Well, thank you for that reaction. But but that was kind of maybe it was in the back of my mind. But what really happened is towards um the end of the calendar year, but my birthday's in May, so it was like the end of the calendar year before that, and it was December, and I was exhausted all the time, and I was sick quite a bit, and just kept getting like the flu. Nothing, it was just exhaustion kind of sickness, and my husband said, I think you need to take like some extra time off at the beginning of next year. We already had some holiday, Christmas time off. And he said, I think you need to extend it. And I was like, there's no way I can. There's too many things to do. And he wisely just said, okay, we'll just pray about it. And then once I kind of started relaxing during our Christmas break and praying about it, and I was like, okay, maybe I will take 2 weeks off. Then about 4 days into the 2 weeks off, I was like, yeah, I'm going to need more. And so I ended up taking 8 months off. But increment. It ended up being, I didn't come back till August. With his blessing, he encouraged me, and God, led me through. It was hard for me to let go because I tend to be responsible, and I knew it would fall on him and on other people, but everybody was fine. I'm not God. And also I was sick and burnt out, and the more I rested, the more I realized how much I was. Have you ever gone on vacation, and when you start to actually rest, you feel worse at first because you start feeling where you were, how exhausted you are, instead of just going, at least that's how it was for me, is as I slowed down, and I just found I was taking a nap every day and sleeping 9 hours every night. And it didn't, that wasn't just for a week, it was for several months. And I was like, okay, I'm really exhausted. And the more I relaxed and then I did some good life coaching with a good, strong Christian friend who really walked me through some things. And then I had dreamt of writing, and and actually a couple of months before my husband suggested I take time off just between the Lord and me. I said, Lord, you told me I was going to write one day. When am I ever going to do that? When is there ever going to be space for that? And completely forgot about it. But then as I was in this time off, I was like, oh, I can actually do that now. So I started and I haven't stopped. So
Wonderful.
yeah.
So you took, it's funny because years ago, I read this book called I Will Not Die an Unlived Life.
Mm,
And
that's a great title.
fantastic. It's a good book. But what I remember the most about this book is that the writer stepped away from her life and went into the mountains in the winter,
Mm,
into this cabin and stayed there for, I think, a month. And for the first several days, she just slept and
mhm,
ate and got up
mhm,
and then went back to bed.
mhm.
And I think I've been there in my own life where you don't realize how much you've been doing
Mhm.
until you stop. And
That's
then
right.
all you can do, you're like, I have all this space, I have all this extra time now. I should be doing all the things I wanted to do. I thought, and here I am wasting that time sleeping, at least in my head. I'm like,
Yeah,
I'm just
yeah,
wasting this time
yeah,
sleeping.
yeah.
And reading that book helped me realize that it's not just me being lazy. It's a thing
Mhm,
people do
mhm.
because we don't realize what we're taking on. And we
Right.
don't realize that we don't give our body the chance to just recover. And so I'm so glad that you did that. And so glad
Yeah,
that you
me
had a
too.
husband who supported that.
Yeah. Yes, it was wonderful, and yeah, so, yeah, during that time, I made some real adjustments in well, added in writing and I started painting, and I had not done anything officially creative before. I was a dancer in my younger years, so that kind of creativity, yes, but not like writing or painting, that kind, and I felt like I couldn't, and not only because of responsibility, I had all these other issues. So it was really cool that God freed me of that because I believe we're all made to be creative. We're made in the
Mhm.
image of God, who's the creator. And believed that, but I didn't quite believe it for myself. But as you mentioned earlier, the more that I started doing it, the more it started flowing, and it was part of the healing, and it was a connection with God it brought about a depth of connection with God that hadn't been there because I think when we create with Him and for Him, there's a we're connecting with a part of Him that we don't if we don't do that in whatever domain, whatever way we bring creativity to the world. It can be inventions, it could be new ideas. It's not limited to the things we typically think of when we think of creativity. So yeah, it's just really opened up a whole new dimension in my spiritual life too, which I did not expect. I thought it would just be kind of the fun things I did on the side, and now it's mostly what I do. I still am involved in ministry, but in a more limited way. So more as an advisor, and I help with different events and hospitality. But I really keep the my mornings for writing and really prioritize that because otherwise I'll just be nickeled and dimed and do everything else. So,
I
um,
know. It's amazing how fast 24 hours goes if you
so
don't bullheadedly carve out this space is
true.
for this. Yeah.
That's right.
Oh, it's totally true. And kind of I have to be bullheaded with myself too, because
Yeah.
I'll see all these things. So sometimes I go somewhere else, like the prayer room at church to just,
Mhm.
get away from that. Now
Mhm.
I like that you got a life coach for a little bit of that.
Mhm.
And I honestly, it's funny you say I'm not doing, as much in ministry. You're doing more this creative thing, but honestly, I can guarantee you that you are inspiring people by doing what you're doing.
Mhm.
People who are seeing that um, you are still close to God. In fact, you are thriving and
Mhm.
being
Mhm.
blessed, and they go, wait, it's not all about work. You
Mhm.
know, sometimes we
Mhm.
think the
That's
Christian
right.
life is all about working for God, and he's he's not a slave driver. He's a
Mhm.
dad.
Yes.
He wants to do stuff with us because he likes us. Uh,
Mhm.
that's not necessarily always going to be, oh, I got to do this. It's I
That's
get to
right.
do this.
Right, right.
So
Mhm.
you got a life coach, and it's really fascinating to me because I'm actually getting certified in this program called Heart-Based Success to help people
Mm.
who are creative work through all the things that creative projects make us discover about ourselves, like our limits
Mm.
and our
Mm.
need for sleep and rest and our need for space
Mm.
and our need
Oh,
for
it's a huge one.
self-compassion.
Mhm.
So, what's one of the key things that you learned during that coaching period?
Mm. There were many things, and you touched on some of them. I think one of the, big ones is, I really need a lot of space just as a person. I'm an extrovert, so but I also need to be away from people to be chill. Otherwise, I'm on all the time. And, and also to let like the creativity flow, I need a certain amount of space. And, I can't be too rigid about that. But anyway, in the sense that if you have some time, you can just do something. You can't wait for the perfect. We can be disciplined, but we also can't wait for everything being perfect so that we can create. So there's a balance there. But what I think the deepest thing I learned was to pay attention to what I'm feeling. I hesitate to say like I don't want to elevate because I think in today's world feelings get really idolized, but mine were the opposite. It was like I was ignoring my own feelings, my own sense. I'd be exhausted, have a headache, be whatever, and I would just keep plowing instead of listening to what my body was saying, listening, and even to my emotions, what they were saying, like of, oh, I really sometimes I still like will say yes to something and I start doing it and everything in me is just like screaming, "What are you doing?" And
Ah,
and then I have to extricate myself, or if I have a responsibility, or, it's not a commitment, I'll fulfill it. But I still have to try to really listen to the Lord in terms of what I'm supposed to do and not do, and but sometimes the way He speaks to me is through how my body feels or how my emotions are responding. So I want to be spirit led, but that goes through my emotions and my body as well. So.
he gives us he gives us so many clues. Uh,
Mhm.
if we are, let's say, I am, oh, I'm walking along barefoot and I feel, prick on the sole of my foot, right? I can either continue walking along and
Yeah.
basically destroy my poor foot, or I can go, okay, we're not going to walk there, right? Or maybe I'm going to put on
Mhm.
some shoes. So, that warns me in a, gentle way. If
Mhm.
I respond immediately,
Mhm.
it's gentle. If I don't respond immediately, it gets harsher and
Yeah.
can do damage. And so our emotions are the same way. And
Mhm.
sometimes it's God wants to challenge us and build our persistence.
Mhm.
But
Yes.
also a lot of times our emotions or our those feelings of, oh, what have I done? Right,
Mhm.
are there to teach us how to mitigate our boundaries. How Because we're the only ones that have the power to
Mhm.
say, I know me and this is what I can do within
Mhm.
reason, right?
Right.
And this is what I can do and still focus on what God has asked me to do,
Right.
right? So maybe I can help you a little bit on Saturday to move, but God has also asked me to make sure that I get this other thing done.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
so there's those things are set there for helping
Mhm.
us, for
Mhm.
warning us and guiding us.
It's so
And so
true.
I'm glad you
Mm.
learned that. That's neat.
Yeah. Little late, but oh well. Better late than
I
never.
Hey, I'm 52 and I'm still learning some of those
Oh,
lessons. I'm
wow.
learning to check in with myself more and more
Yeah. Yeah.
before responding, because I respond to
Mhm.
me, but I also really, need space or else my creativity goes completely dry
Mhm.
because it's just not being
Mm.
fed.
Mhm.
Nice.
Exactly.
Now this
Exactly.
has done really well for you though. I mean,
Yeah.
wow, sir. You
Mhm.
not only were in my friend in the anthology with my friend, but you actually have a series of books that sound fascinating.
Oh, thank you.
So, um, you live in France. And you're
Mhm.
not in some new modern apartment. You are
No.
in a what?
A 500-year-old chateau. Yeah. Which it's not a fancy chateau, it's like a crumbling old chateau, but it's a chateau
But
nonetheless.
it's 500 years
Yeah,
old. That just doesn't even happen anymore. They don't even
I
build
know,
printers to last more than 5 years.
I know. Seriously, seriously.
And so you actually, researched the Huguenots.
Yeah, yes.
And,
Yeah.
now for people who don't know who they are,
Mhm,
can you just tell
mhm.
us just a tiny bit of that
Yes.
background?
Yes. So a Huguenot, or like English speakers often say Huguenot. I've sort of adopted the French way of saying it. So either way is fine. But
Well, they were French, right? So French is
yeah,
probably
well,
right.
it just sort of now it's stuck as Huguenot, and sometimes people go, oh, so either way is fine. But they were the French Protestants, and
Mhm.
from the time of the Reformation. So before the Reformation happened in Germany with Martin Luther and all that, that was like in the early 1500s. There was only the Catholic Church in Europe, in Western Europe, and then Luther does that. We have Protestantism, and both Catholics and Protestants thought that each other were heretics. That's because it was so new to have two streams of Christianity. We have no reference point for that in our day, where we have many streams of Christianity, and many denominations and all that. So, but at that time, so we have to kind of roll back our minds to, like, it was just Catholics, and then all of a sudden there's Protestants,
Yeah,
and so the Huguenot were simply the French Protestants.
gotcha. And here's the thing, we all believe in Jesus, but Martin Luther saw things that were going on in the church he grew
Mhm,
up in
mhm.
that he felt needed to be reformed.
Yes.
Anytime people are in charge of something, right, we can get eh, a little off balance in ways. We
Mhm,
can end up
mhm,
allowing things or specifically doing things that
mhm,
um, take us further away from what Jesus
mhm.
tried to show us about God.
Yeah.
And so Martin Luther felt that there were certain things that needed to be changed, and he started a movement of
Mhm.
people following
Accidentally.
Jesus,
Yeah.
but with different rules.
Mhm. Yeah.
And so that kind of made people scared, right? People from the traditional
Mhm.
background of Catholicism were like, no, now you're misleading people, you're leading people away from the church. When in
Right.
reality, the church was simply expanding.
Yeah.
And people were trying to do things differently. And
Mhm.
I think every so often we kind of need to do that, not
Yeah.
necessarily to change the truth that Jesus is the one who came to represent the love of our Father
Mhm.
and to redeem us from
Mhm.
things that just destroy us, right?
Mhm.
Um, and to show us who we are and what we're capable of doing. And sometimes that's really ugly, right? With the crucifixion. So,
Mhm.
we're not getting away from that story, but and that truth, but occasionally we do have to take another look at how we're doing things and is it
Right.
functional?
Right.
Does it hurt people or draw people to God?
Right.
And change. And so
Mhm.
what he did at the time, though, people didn't understand that,
Mm-mm.
and they were scared. And so
Yeah.
you actually wrote your novels kind of in line with some of the things that were going on during that
Right.
conflict.
Right.
Neat.
Yeah.
And
I
there's a
wrote
little
specific.
romance
Yeah,
there.
a little romance. Oh, yeah, you gotta have romance. But yeah, both of them take place in the first one's very much in the chateau where I live, and the second one's across the street, and it's in our town and in the region, because this particular region where I live is called the Cévennes, and there were loads of Huguenots. It was still today. I go to the dentist an hour away, and he goes, "Oh, you're from the Cévennes. There's lots of Protestants, right?" Like, it's still the reputation, but it doesn't mean there's a lot of people who really know and follow and love Jesus. Just like in any church or denomination, there are people who love Jesus, and there are people who just are there for the tradition. That
Right.
can be true anywhere of any church. It's a little bit it's been tricky writing about this huge conflict between Catholics and Protestant. I am the I am not at all anti-Catholic. I do not think Catholics are heretics. I believe they're
Right.
believers. You know, like I put a little thing at the beginning of my book. This was it's more like for them at the time, it was like Muslims and Christians. It was more, the conflict was at that level to the point where they killed each other, and there were
Oh,
things that it got it. But there's also a lot of God intervening, and there. So it was. There's some dramatic things that happen, and as I researched this place where I live and the things that happened, I was like, this is just an amazing story. So I took the interesting bits of the story and then created fictional characters. Some are actual historical characters, and then created fictional ones to round out the story. So it was
that is such a cool thing. I mean, I have learned so much about history because of reading a book that made me want to look it up
exactly.
and find out how things happen. And it's just such a neat way to inspire people. And it's a neat way to help people reflect on human nature because people will
Mhm,
always find a reason to fight each other. Uh,
mhm,
there are people we want to be right,
mhm,
and we get scared of something different
mhm.
and we end up fighting
Yeah,
for,
it's
and
true,
oh
unfortunately.
gosh, I mean, over and over. We find a reason. And so
Yeah.
it's just there's so much that
Mhm,
we get from stories like this. And your
mm.
character in particular goes through an internal conflict.
Mhm, mhm. Mhm. Yeah, that was really important to me that it wasn't just the history, but it shows, a spiritual journey for in both the novels that the main character is a young woman, and in the first one, she really doubts that God's there or that he's good, but she's a Huguenot, so, like, there's no other like, she has nowhere to go, but she has to
Right.
hide it, but then now she's gonna get persecuted because they were severely persecuted.
Mhm.
And so she has to sort all that out. And then in the second book, the young woman does believe, but she has a hard time believing God really loves her and really accepting that. And so consequently, she has a lot of fear, and yet she lives in this really oppressive environment. So it's how she comes to overcome her fears and be who God made her to be. So yeah.
That's beautiful. That is, I've known some very, very special people in my life who didn't find it hard to believe that God existed, but
Mhm.
found it hard to believe that He loved them,
Mhm.
because of tragedies, because of
Mhm.
their own self-perception,
Mhm.
uh, because of things, and it's really, really just brings me to tears to think of how
Mhm.
over the years they've discovered that God's love, He just adores them and that
Mhm.
He blesses them. And
Mhm.
it took shifting perspective,
Mhm.
and it took forgiveness and just a
Mhm.
lot of different things
Mhm.
to grow that. But it's really neat to
Mhm.
see how someone can be just a light in a room once they discover how much God
Mhm.
loves. You just
Mhm.
walk into a room and it's just brighter
Mhm.
because
Yeah, yeah.
they know, I think, better than any of us, how the
Mhm.
power of the love of God.
Mhm. Mhm.
Cool.
Mhm.
So your book is available on Amazon, is that right?
Right, right, that's right.
Great. Or
Mm.
did you have a website that you would rather people go to so that
Well, I don't
people
sell it through the website. The
okay,
website just links back to Amazon. Because I'm in Europe, it's a little
mhm.
complicated, the whole
Mm,
thing. So I just decided to be really simple and just keep it on simple from my end and keep it on Amazon. I don't love that, but that's just what I've
I
needed to do.
totally get it. You want to do the work of writing, you don't wanna do
Yeah,
the work of managing a shop, right? I
yeah,
get that
exactly.
personally.
You got it.
So you've got the Huguenot Resistance series, and in that, you have The Light Comes, or wait, the
Yeah, the
first book
first one
was, actually the name of this episode. And so tell
yeah,
us what that is.
it's
When
"Though Darkness Descend."
Though Darkness Descends. I keep wanting to say When Darkness. Okay, Though
Mm,
Darkness Descend
that's book
is
1.
the first book,
Mhm.
and then book 2 is The Light Comes Through, and these are
Shines
both
through.
by
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, shines through. Thank you. Light shines through. And these are both by Janet Weiner, Weiner. We're going to post the link in the comments, but you can also follow Janice. Janet, where can they follow you?
My website is my name with my maiden name in the middle. It's Janet and then
Mhm.
Joannou, Joanou, Weiner.com. And I have, so it's Janet Joannou Weiner. And Joannou is like Joan with an OU. I grew up having to spell my name and describe my last name all the time. But
Janet Joanno Weiner.com.
.com. Yeah, perfect. And you said it beautifully.
Nice.
And
I've never heard the name Joanna. That's really
nobody has,
interesting.
except for my cousins and my siblings. So, well,
Mm.
except for in Cyprus, where my grandfather was from, it's everywhere. It's like Johnson
Oh,
in Cyprus. It's on grocery stores. It's on businesses. But we don't live in Cyprus, so But
fascinating.
yeah, but yes. So that is I have a blog that I put out once a month, and it's about life and beauty and the south of France. It like has and some travel things that I've done, and so there's blog there, and then about the books and and I have a
Okay,
monthly
that's
newsletter as well
really
that goes
cool.
in a little more depth spiritually as well as keeps you up to date on the book stuff. But you can sign up for that if anybody's interested on the website. So.
Neat, neat, neat. My the cover designer for the 3 a.m. book moved to France just
Mm,
a month ago with his
mm.
wife who's from France. So it's kind of neat. I told my husband, I said, I wonder what God's doing. We know two people in
Yeah.
France now.
Well, you are most welcome to. We have a lot of space.
But will you serve me drinks first? Oh gosh,
Yeah,
that is so
I
cool. Well,
will.
I'm going to post these links in the comments, and it's been such a pleasure meeting you,
Thank
Janet.
you.
If you had just one piece of advice, and you've given us such a wealth here, if you had just one piece of advice to um, kind of save yourself from burnout before it's too late and really open
Mhm,
up the space, what would
mhm.
you say?
Well, I really love the verse, Matthew 11:28-30, and I love it in the Message. I don't read the Message usually, but it is I mean, not it it's just not the one I go to, but it is beautiful in it, and it sums up what I would the answer to your question of and it says, "Come to me, come get away with me, and you'll recover your strength." Your life, your life. You'll recover your life. So right there, walk with me and work with me. What this is Jesus talking, of course. Watch how I do it. Learn the unforced rhythms of grace. I love that so
Mm,
much. I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Keep company with me, and you'll learn to live freely and lightly. I
yeah,
can't really say it better than that. It's really walking with Jesus, not going faster, not going slower, not taking on things that he's not asking us to take on, which you mentioned, like just going a little slower before you say yes and checking in with him, with yourself, um, and because he says his yoke is easy and his burden is light is the translation we're used to, but which is also true. But I just found that unforced rhythms of grace is like we walk through the day with him. We don't just have a quiet time and then go do our stuff, for him. We walk with him. So I'm still learning it. I still, but I'm better than and breathing's really good too. So taking time to
mm. Breathing. I've found that there's this thing called breath prayer,
mm,
where you
yes.
just pause for a moment. And I found that when I use this before doing things that are um, my go-to stress busters that aren't
Yeah.
necessarily healthy for me, right?
Mhm.
If I just pause when I start to feel the tension and I just breathe and then
Mhm.
I breathe out something like unforced rhythms of grace
Yeah,
or
exactly.
breathe, I come to you, Lord.
Mhm.
You
Mhm.
know,
Mhm.
anything like you just kind of letting yourself calm down, letting that tummy relax, letting those shoulders
Yeah.
down
Yeah,
and letting that spirit connect.
that's right.
That's That's good, Janet. I love that verse. That's, I think, one of the most inspired translations of a verse I've ever seen.
Yeah, it's really stuck with me because it's so beautiful and true. So,
Yeah. Well, Janet, thank you so much for being with us. You've
oh.
been such a breath of fresh air. I
Well, thank
appreciate
you,
you.
Christy. It's been delightful to talk with you. I feel like we just sat and two friends talking, so that's great. Thank you so
I
much.
have enjoyed it very much. I think Sarah is a very smart girl for her to meet up
Yes.
with you.
Well, she's a very smart girl, but I'm glad
Oh,
she
that's
connected
true.
us. Yes.
Yeah. Well, God bless you and your husband and your beautiful community abundantly.
Yep.
And you too, if you're listening to us and you enjoy this, go ahead and share it with your friends and check out Janet's book. Summer is coming. You need something to read by the pool.
That's right.
All right. We'll see you next
Thank you,
time.
Christy. Bye-bye.